Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining this webinar. My name is Olivia Goldschmidt. I'm a journalist, and I'll be your MC for this webinar. First, I would like to introduce Jorge Diner, our Executive Director of Hadassah International, to say some welcome words. Hi, Jorge.
Hi, Olivia. Thank you for the introduction, and I just want to say something that relates to what you see in the background of my screen, and that refers to the fact that around International Women's Day on March 8th, and I mean the days around, we started to end the silence on sexual assault committed by Hamas. And when I say we started, that means this is not something that we finish or that we ended because we still have, we don't have the decisions by international organizations to address the issue of the sexual violence committed by Hamas since October 7. During October 7, for those who were victims, and those who survive after being suffering from sexual violence by the terrorists of Hamas, and following October 7, those who were in captivity, some of them returned, and many of them, unfortunately, are in Gaza, in tunnels under, again, earth, and suffering from being hostages and the double suffering of being, presumably, as we know, sexually assaulted by Hamas terrorists. And when I said that we started ending the silence, I really have to say thank you for all the people who stood up March 7, March 8, March 10, in the different dates around International Women's Day, and rallied and made events and painting their shoes in red, and did so many activities around the world to make sure that the voice of the dozens of thousands, over 130,000 people around the world who signed the petition that we presented to the United Nations, that signal the beginning of a process that we hope will bring justice, and then will stop the use of sexual violence as a weapon of war, and the use of sexual violence in any case. This is not a cause that we do because we are Israelis or that we are Jews. This is a human issue, and that's something that should never be accepted by anybody. And we will continue. We'll continue the fight to end the silence, because that's what we deserve to give to those who suffer that. And we have to do, and we must do, in order to avoid this to happen again anywhere. Not in Israel, not in Gaza, not in Ukraine, not in Rwanda, not anywhere. And that's our commitment as an organization. And that stands for values. And we are pleased and thankful for anybody who is joining this action. And what we will hear today is basically so much information and details from somebody who we are proud of having as part of Hadassah. But I leave that to Olivia to take it from here and present our panelists. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jorge, for your kind words and your commitment, of course. Now I would like to introduce a very special guest that is here with us today. Dr. Dvorah Bauman is a gynecologist and the director of the Pat Ami Center for Victims of Sexual Abuse at Hadassah Hospital. She's also, as I have just learned, the head of the pediatric and adolescent gynecologist at Hadassah. And she has worked in the hospital for the last 14 years. So thank you very much for coming here to this webinar today, Dvorah.
Thank you so much. It's privilege, my privilege.
No, it's our honor to have you. And I would like to please ask you if we could start with you telling us what Pat Ami Center is about, with a brief overview of sexual abuse.
Thank you. So I know that most of you are aware of the very too frequent too prevalent occurring of sexual violence or assault. But you have to know that it's even more than maybe you think. It's 1 in 3 women and 1 in 6 men do experience any kind of sexual assault during their life. And it's thousands of years and even more that we are aware of that, or we're at least familiar with that. We have description even in the Bible. However, although it's so common and so prevalent, still the society, doesn't really accept that it is a real crime. It's still always making the women or the men feeling that maybe it's some kind of their guiltness, and that's why it makes them very ashamed to talk about it, and even to report and to come to have some assistance, like in hospitals, doctors, medical assistants, legal assistants, etc. We are talking that only 18, not 80, 18% of sexually assaulted, I would say women, because they are the most. So it's about less than 20% of sexually assaulted women will come to ask for assistance, medical, legal, social, psychological, etc. And we know that about children, that once they are abused, sexually abused, more than 50% are not talking to anybody until they are adult. They don't share this thing. So that's the unreported, the shameful, and the feeling of guiltiness make them make this kind of event very devastating and destructive. That's what we structure here in Hadassah, the Bauman Center, which is like emergency center. It's 24/7. It's 365 days, even Yom Kippur, open for everybody. We're a team on call. We are consistent of 3 professionals. It's a social worker, it's a doctor and nurse. And what we are doing in our center, the first thing would be the psychosocial support, which is the most important. And then we provide medical assistance, treatment, prevention of unwanted pregnancy and, sexually transmitted infection. And also we are collecting forensic evidence for legal processes if the victim will like to do. And what else I would say very important, as I explained, that it is very devastating. Those victims have very high morbidity rate. We're talking, we're not talking in general about diseases that they have many complications. So we're talking about diabetes and cancer, etc. But we're not talking enough about sexually assaulted women or men. We have to know that 60 to 70% of them will have psychiatric illness. They will have psychiatric treatments. They have much more, for example, cancer, cervical cancer. They have more cardiovascular disease like myocardial infarction, and they die. Their mortality rate is almost 4 times more than people in their age who weren't sexually assaulted.
Those are some very terrifying numbers, and I'm glad to hear the team that works with them is so interdisciplinary, right, with very different professions. Following up, I would like to ask you, do you think there is a difference between when you see one sexual abuse case rather than what happened on October 7 in terms of scope or determination?
Yes, it's a big difference. First of all, I would say that, working in this kind of center, Batami, for it's about 9 years that I'm there, no, it's 11 years I'm there. It's 9 years that I'm the director of Batami, and having many really awful cases. I was sure I saw the most, the most awful things, the most horrific things, but it was nothing compared to what happened on October 7. what happened, it's a big topic called conflict-related sexual violence, which is, again, known for centuries. However, it's just in the end of the last century, in the end of 19th, that the International Court on Everybody said that it is a war crime. It's not part of the war, it's a war crime, sexual violence. And they were trying to, to reduce the occurrence of this kind of violence. It's not really reduced. However, in my opinion, and I was reading a lot of articles from all other places, and what happened on October 7 was, in my eyes, most horrific. The things that happened there, and I don't want to go into the graphics, it was the people were mutilated in their genitals, and with to the point they couldn't be distinguished between male and female. Sorry again for the graphics. Women were cutted down, and they were cutted, the breasts were cutted, and many other very really horrific and unheard things, unhuman things. And again, what I would say that what was very typical about Hamas is that kind of obsession of the violent or brutal sexual violence. If you compare even to other places of what we call conflict-related sexual violence, it's in many places they were invading some other region, the enemy region. They would kill soldiers, they will do a battle, and in the end they would rape the women. Here they didn't start any war, they just tortured and did sexual violence. And I think, again, I'm not a strategic or military person, but I thought that if we have 3,000 terrorists that are invading our country, which is really small, they could reach Tel Aviv and Jerusalem and every place. I heard that they were stopped by, by army, but that was because they were, I would say, wasting time in the south by doing a lot of violence, including sexual violence, and just after they try to go further. So it's very, very obsessively sexual violence, horrific sexual violence. And when we look for in the literature, what is the reason or the rationale for sexual violence in those conflict areas, is that in many times that's that's kind of an act of humiliation, of breaking the spirit. And Israeli nation is known by its very high and strong spirit. And I think that the thinking was, the rationale was that by doing such horrific things, they will break our spirit, and then after, the country is in their hands. Thanks God they were wrong, but what happened was terrible.
Yes, exactly. What are some of the long-lasting effects of sexual abuse victims, in your experience?
Yes, so we mentioned already the many complications. It's very psychiatric. For example, there are a lot of researchers on this case, and there is a very interesting research from Berlin, from German women after the Second World War, and they were comparing women that had trauma of the war, like bombing and running and, having their families killed and etc., to women that had sexually abused at that time at Berlin. And they looked back for 40 years, and they saw that women that were having the regular trauma, war trauma, without sexual abuse, they would have even some kind of respect. And we know that people who survive war, they're not heroes, but they are very respectful people. But that wasn't the case for sexually abused. They were living with the shame. They were living usually not being able to make couples, families, children, and etc. and etc. So we are seeing that that's devastating. And what else is very typical for sexually abused women and men, of course, I'm talking about women because they are the majority, but it's to both the genders, is something called self-harm. Those people, and I'm not going into the pathophysiology, it's very complicated of those people, but they feel because of the society, because of the shame, because of the guiltiness, they feel that they are bad, they are bad people, they are not somebody who deserve good life, and etc. And that's why they harm themselves. Sometimes the harm is by cutting in their down in the genitals. And what happened with this war, and especially what happened with we'll talk later on, what happened with the world, how the world is seeing us, although we had such trauma, made those people that didn't have any connection to October 7th, but they had been sexually abused in the past, is that they had like a flare-up. They started to harm themselves even more and very badly. And we had even a case 1 or 2 months after the starting of the war of a woman that was sexually abused in her childhood. And she was cutting herself down in the genitals so badly that she came with a profuse bleeding and she had to be taken to the surgery. And that's what happens to people who survived from October 7 and those who survived other times of sexual abuse.
That's absolutely terrible. We know that sometimes it takes years before victims of abuse to start talking about what happened to them. What are you preparing your team or other colleagues to detect if those cases come up? And just another quick word, when I heard you in Israel talk about this, I said wow, this is something that it's an amazing preparation, right?
Yes, so we have just mentioned about that most of them not talking. And by the way, we prepared this webinar more than a few days ago, and exactly yesterday, the day before, there was a fake announcement of a woman from Gaza, from Shifa Hospital, that she said that she was raped by Israeli soldiers, right? And then it came up a fake. Yes.
Wow.
So when I heard, before everything, just I heard it, my husband said, listen, that's what they say on the radio. I said, no, she wasn't raped, because a woman that is raped never come up immediately after and talk about in front of all the other that she was raped. Doesn't happen. That doesn't happen. And the same evening or something they decided, and that would it's there is no, even other hostages that were released, and you were most of the time in Israel, so you heard about them. Okay, they talk about hunger, they didn't eat, they didn't have a shower, they didn't. Nobody said she was raped, right? And if you hear about rape, it's always somebody else, right? She saw another girl, she saw her friend. Nobody was raped. Nobody said. They do talk, but very close people. So usually women are not talking about, and there are, again, researchers that in Rwanda, for example, most of the women talk more than a year after, or even 2 years. Almost nobody came to say that she was raped. And what I say is that that's my sentence that is very clearly to me. They are not talking, but their bodies are screaming. And that's how they come a lot to medical professionals, providers, and also to emergency room with, many complaints, not, very vague complaints like stomach and headache and something else and weakness and etc. and etc. And they go through all the examination and everything is fine. And they are released, and then they come a few days later, and etc. etc. And they also make some kind of bad feelings to the staff, because staff see them and say, that's people, you know, they are a bit weird. They don't have anything, they just come every day. Yes.
You mean the staff realizes that there is something a little odd about these patients?
No, they don't realize that's the point. They just like you probably nudnik. Yes, they are just people who are complaining all the time. So what we decided here in Hadassah, that we have to identify those people. And that's what we are making now, a special education, maybe it's like lessons for emergency room staff, that once they see those people that coming many times, don't have anything, just complaints, everything is fine, not to release them, but to flag them, to say, okay, maybe they have some sexual assault in the past. And then to call, we'll structure a very special, what called first responder team, which is, of course, will be with social workers and etc. That this team will be called at that moment when they start to suspect it, and this team will accompany this kind of patient for many other things, because the hospital is very I would say, traumatic, that can flare up some trauma in the past. And what I'm structuring more than that is a special gynecological clinic. If I said that they are coming to emergency, but they are not coming to specialists. And for example, one of the specialists that then don't want to see at all, that's gynecologist. Because, you know, gynecology is very related to the place or to the region where they had the trauma. So what we are going to structure is a special gynecological clinic that would be called Embraced and Sensitive Gynecological Clinic. And embraced comes from the word in Hebrew, otef. Otef is the envelope of Gaza. That's the settlements that were attacked. And in Hebrew, it's otefet v'regisha, which is, you know, sounds like something that it has connection to October 7. So we know that they will come. We know that they won't talk. And we have to try to identify, to, you know, to understand what's going under score.
Wow, that's amazing. So before we continue to them, we know that sometimes the slogan that we choose for the advocacy campaign was break the silence. Do you think having public conversations about sexual abuse can help victims in any way?
Yes, sure. As we said already, that what happens is that this kind of crime, sexual violence, is very unclear to the victim. For example, if I say that, you know, you go with a purse on the street, it's not that you put it something, it's on your body, and somebody takes and, you know, and aggressively takes your bag, you will understand very clearly that you are the victim and he is perpetrator, but he's the criminal. But with the sexual violence, what the society injects for women, for everybody, that it's not true that she is really the victim, and it's not true that he is really the criminal. And for example, from Canadian research, from police of Canadian research, when sexually abused women came to the interrogation, kind of with complaint, and they had the interrogation, the most frequent question was, what have you wearing this evening? Okay, so the question by itself makes makes some kind of confusion. And people did that, the Secretary of UN and many others that said it was not in vacuum. What means it didn't happen in vacuum? It means that if there is a conflict and there is somebody that you politically think he is the aggressor, so people are allowed to sexually to rape the woman of this aggressor. That's what it means. Or the other that said it depends on the context. It means that there are kind of contexts that it's okay to rape women. So those pronouncing, and again, the silence means that maybe in this case, it wasn't really, they are not really the victims. Maybe the terrorists that are politically are seeing, but many people like, liberty soldiers or something, they didn't so bad, because it depends on the context. You don't have to condemn it, because if it would be real crime, you would condemn it. So those things are, again, distracting, because those women, not only that they are has so horrible trauma, but they are not accepted as victims by the world, because the world is not condemning this sexual crime. And that is really, I would say, it's like, we saw that after the Second World War, some people who came, the Holocaust survival, came, and here people laughed at them or something, or, didn't give them the respect. We said that that was the last and the most horrible trauma for them. So here, those women, this is another trauma. And I'm not sure that from this trauma, they will be possible to overcome.
Yes, I think what you're saying is like it's a second kind of trauma, right? It's one thing to have experienced that, and then another thing is to relieve that there's socially or politically some way of saying you were not the victim in this case.
Right.
So that is really terrible. And to finish off last, if we have some time, is to the extent at which sexual abuse was caused on October 7th from multiple sources or investigations can make one believe that rape was like a central objective of Hamas on that day, as well as killing or taking hostages. Why do you think the fixation of rape was so important?
So it's again, I think that the main purpose of Hamas was really humiliating and trying to break our spirit. And it's very special about the Jewish nation that, that the children which are born to women, they are having the nation of the woman. And because in other places of conflict area, for example, in if I don't mistake, in not Serbia, in Bosnia, Serbia was the aggressor. So they were trying to get the women of Bosnia pregnant, so the children that will be born will be Serbian, wasn't it? But in Israel, it doesn't work out, because every child that will happen, in many places, pogroms in East Europe, where I'm coming, my parents are coming from, and etc. Never mind who was the aggressor, the rapist, or the criminal, they are always Jewish. So they were trying to do it much more aggressively and much more horrifically and much more humiliating. For example, we have evidence that it's terrible. I'm sorry for the graphics. Holocaust survival, a lady almost 90 years old, that her granddaughter was raped in front of her eyes. And they were trying to do, as I said, the humiliation. And I think that after all what happened from the end of the 90s, but mostly what happened on October 7, should be so crystal clear, as Biden said, crystal clear, that violence in sexual conflict areas shouldn't be part of the war. Rape is not part of the war. War is terrible. People are dying, innocent people are dying, hunger, dying for it. But it's nothing to do with rape. Rape is something totally different. It doesn't depend on the context. It does not happen in a vacuum. It's always should be condemned. And I think that maybe all the people, and that's what also the Hadassah International, which I'm really proud of, the project they are doing, that has to say not only October 7, we have to go to all the world and say it shouldn't happen. And what is interesting is that it's not mandatory. I mean, we are so used that, in the kind of wars, there are always rape, but it's not part of the world. And for example, where we see the reason for that, in the IDF, Israeli forces, we have from the Hebrew University, a master thesis that checked for Israeli IDF in Palestinian-Israeli conflict, and there was a big rarity of rape, almost no rape. And if we divide the rape, for example, for what we call intentional, for example, that the commanders call the people, or all the leaders are saying the soldiers go and rape. Now that's what happened here with Hamas. Terrorists, for example, that they had in their pockets, they had notes that they had permission from their Islamic leaders, imam, that although in Islam it's forbidden to rape, but they have the permission to rape everybody, women, men, children, and etc. So the Israeli soldiers is almost never do the intentional. There are no commanders or leaders that convince them to rape, and even what we call spontaneous rape, that's something that happened with the soldiers. It's very, very rare. So it's possible. So if we are now coming with a big agenda for the whole world, that something like October 7th shouldn't happen, that rape is not part of the war, and that you can educate your army or your military people not to rape civilians. So I hope that we in Israel are coming with a big agenda for the whole world.
Wow, yes, it's very amazing. And another thing that I remembered from your panel from last time I was in Jerusalem is you talked about something that stuck with me. It's maybe not from your medical part, but from your ideas. And you said something along the lines of rape being like a symbol to like end the continuity of people of a nation. Do you think that in this case was that the intent?
Yes, I think that was the part, but again, I think that there was some kind of purpose to cause us as Israeli people, maybe all the Jews, were one nation. Israel is a small country. I mean, the Jewish people is one nation. We are all together. What happens here, I hope never, but it affects also all the Jews, all the world. And I think that they really, it's my opinion, it's not medical, not evidence-based, they tried to break our spirit, to say that maybe people will leave the country, maybe people that would not like to go to the army, maybe the fear, the fear and the unhope and etc. But what happened is that it did on the contrary. People now are not living in the country. Most of the people of Israel are not living in the country, although we are quite in an unsafe. And people are going to the army from all over. We have people 60 and something more years that are going to volunteer to the army, to IDF. So I think that it's almost, yesterday was Purim. So they had one idea, and it's Venafocho. It's went, I don't know in English how you say Venafocho, right? With the meaning of Nafocho. So that's what and I think about it just in the moment, because we're in Purim, after Purim. It's caused on the opposite of what they plan to do.
Exactly, like the opposite reaction. So we celebrate even in times of despair, or even if someone is trying to harm us. Dvorah,
Yes.
I have nothing but a deep, I really want to say thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for this webinar. Your words are inspiring, even though the subject is terrific and incredibly hard. Your insights really help us put, and we're coming to the end of March almost, right? And this month was highly dedicated to this. As Jorge said previously, we're not stopping here or continuing our work to ending the silence, but it's been really, really, really amazing to hear your words on it. So thank you again. Thank you for inspiring us. Thank you for the panel on January, and thank you again for this amazing, amazing. So before we log off, there's one question
Just
from the
want to say,
audience.
I just want to say again, thank you. I have a big privilege. I appreciate it very much. And I'm talking to you as part of my nation. We are really one nation. That's my feeling. So thank
Exactly.
you.
So before we log off, there's one question from the audience. Do you have time to answer it?
Yes.
I'll read it. So based on Dr. Bauman's experience, is there any chance for total recovery of such a trauma, or is it a wound on one's soul forever?
Thank you. It's a very interesting question. I would say that recovery is too big. Is it too big word? It means that it will always go with the people. They will always have something. If you have 5 minutes, because I do have, I will tell
We
you
have.
it's
Yes.
optimistic story.
Okay.
And I'm doing it with the permission of the person. My daughter, my youngest daughter, is ending now the law school here in Hebrew University. And on the second year, she had somebody, another student, that asked her, listen, your family name is Bauman. Do you have any relation to Dvorah Bauman? And she said, yes, it's my mom. So, and again, I have the permission. So that girl told her that she was in Batami. And she was 18. And she just wanted to die. She didn't want to do anything. She went, and she, after the rape, she was drinking a lot, and she was lying in the middle of the street, and her friends took her to Batami. And she said, I didn't want anything. I just wanted to die. And we're in Batami. Again, I'm not trying to, to take compliments, but all the time we're trying to explain her that she has all the thing. I understand in the first minute that she's very intelligent. And I said, listen, you have the capability to be everything that you want. And she said, no, I will not. Again, to make the story short, she's now ending the law school. She's one of the excellent students, and she's going to be. She will going to work in this field of sexual on the legal aspects of sexual abuse. Did she forget she was raped? No. Did she has a lot of times that she is having flashback? Yes. But she is taking her life, and she is succeeding in go forward. And I suppose, as we are now in contact, that she will marry one day and she will have children one day, but she will always have it in the back of her mind.
But still a life not forgotten, but yes, used as a power, right? As a part of her experience. Yeah, use the experience to do something else, right? To do something better for others. Dvorah, again, thank you very much. And I think I leave the words to Jorge.
Yeah, this is, first of all, Dvorah, Dvorah is a true humanitarian who cares about humanity. And, a confession I have to make. I met Dvorah, although I am with Hadassah for the last 14 years. I had the honor to meet Dvorah for the first time when we shared the experience of being at the humanitarian mission that we did at the beginning of the war in Ukraine, in the border between Poland and Ukraine, and she was the leader of the last delegation, if I remember well, one of the last delegations that we had there, and it was amazing for me to meet the person that is Dvorah, besides all the professional experience she shared, is the human being behind. And, you know, we are living, this is living history. You know, this is really a very historical moment for humanity. And what's happening is happening, things happen all the time. And I just wanted to share something that it just popped up in my notification on news while this was happening, and you are going to be reading about this probably in the next few hours. It just came out that the New York Times published a while ago the first testimony of an Israeli hostage that went out sharing how she was sexually assaulted and tortured while she was a hostage. Amit Susanna, a 40 years old hostage who returned on November 30, went out now. And this is the first, you know, it took her time, as Dvorah, you were speaking, but now she went public. This is an interview with interviews also with the doctors that spoke with her immediately after the release. 8 hours talking to her. New York Times wouldn't publish unless we know what are New York Times positions in general in relates to Israel. And we published this, and it's the first hostage that goes out with a very detailed description of the sexual, how she was sexually assaulted while in captivity. And I think it's for me was interesting to see this happening, and we'll be following this, and it reflects the same, also the way that this is not just a story for Israel, as Dvorah, as you said, this is a story for humanity, and the campaign will continue to make sure that we deal with this anywhere, with anybody, that we stop this here and in any other place that will happen in the world. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for the warm words as well.
Thank you, everyone, for coming to this webinar. We hope the information that we have shared was useful and meaningful. Thank you again for being here. I'm Israel Hay.